And now it's time for the Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and Michael Best Strategies.
Hi, I'm Chuck Chvala, former Senate Majority Leader.
And I'm Scott Jensen, former Assembly Speaker.
And we're the Insiders. So, Scott, the big race, of course, was the Supreme Court race in the spring and the primary. But there was another big race over in the suburbs of Milwaukee, the 8th Senate District. And there was no primary on the progressive or Democratic side, and it is a partisan race here. But it's a special election to replace Alberta Dowling, who's been around for a long time, since 1992. The district has changed substantially. But what's your take on what happened there and the impact that has for the general election in this special?
I think it was a good night for Republicans, and it really does solidify their odds of maintaining that state Senate seat going forward. This is still a Republican district, though not as strongly as it was in the past. It's about a 53-54% Republican district. The two conservative candidates for justice got 52.5% of the vote in that district on primary night. And the Republican candidates running for the state legislature got 57% of the vote. So all that suggests this thing leans in the Republicans' favor. Plus, I know the Democrats are going to come after Representative Knodl for his position on abortion, for supposedly being an election denier. But I think that in the end, he's represented almost half of this district in the time he has been in office as a result of redistricting, moving him around. He has made personal connections with voters all over the district as a result. And as you know, most of the time when there's an open state Senate seat and one of the candidates is an assembly representative in that state Senate seat, the odds overwhelmingly favor, not always, but overwhelmingly favor that assembly rep in getting and moving up to the state Senate seat. So I feel good about Representative Dan Knodl being promoted to the state Senate in the April spring elections.
I think Scott makes a lot of good points about the district. Let me say two things. Number one, and the primary thing I think for Democrats and progressives to remember is that I believe this is a two-step process for the candidate who's running. She's a great candidate. I mean, Habish and Sinekin, those are some pretty good Democratic names. And she's a wonderful person and a great campaigner. But I think she recognizes that, frankly, even though we've had a primary, even this election, this special election, which will probably be a smaller and more conservative, more Republican turnout, is really just a tune-up for the fall of 2024 election. And I expect you'll see these candidates running against each other again. I would say this: I think there is a chance. In fact, I think there's more than a chance. As Scott mentioned, it was 50-some% by the Supreme Court candidates, but I think the margin could widen for Judge Janet in the spring. And if you see that, you could see Habish Sinekin be the victor, the Democrat be the victor. And that would be a canary in the coal mine, which is an ugly situation for the Republicans moving forward to 2024. I really think there are a lot of things happening here, especially in the suburbs around Milwaukee. This may be the first indication that would be an eye-opener, I think, for most people if that district went to Democrats in a special election. But also, I would see this really as a tune-up for 2024, and I think there will be a better seat for the Democrats to run in there, and I expect that you will see success for them then. If I were to predict, I think it's a tight one for the spring. I still think, given what could happen this spring, I think that there's a good chance the Democrat could win.
So I still favor the Republican. I think the odds do as well. But I want to just point out that there's a reason this race is important beyond the fact of is the district going to go to Republican or Democrat? If the Republicans retain this seat, it puts them back at a supermajority in the state Senate. And there are some powers that you get to exercise with a supermajority that you don't with one less vote. So it does give the Republican state Senate a little more leverage in the battle between Governor Evers and the state legislature. So that's why it's important to Republicans.
And by the way, without that supermajority in the assembly, that power is much more limited. And by the way, here's the interesting thing to watch for. The Republicans could have, again, restored their supermajority in the Senate. How amazing that in one election, they could go from a supermajority to a minority after 2024. That tells you something about how gerrymandered the seats are in the state of Wisconsin. And let's see what happens. But this will be an interesting race, I think, in April.
Stay tuned.
Listening to The Insiders with Chuck Chvala and Scott Jensen, sponsored by the Wisconsin Counties Association and Michael Best Strategy.